Sanad, as you might be aware, is the largest independent engine MRO in the region. We work with all the major OEMs for civil engines, including Rolls-Royce, GE, IAE, and Safran. At Sanad, we aim to be thought leaders in the industry and are always looking for opportunities to strengthen our unique position in the global aerospace value chain. And to further these objectives, what we're doing at Sanad is we're conducting a series of panels and interviews with key industry leaders in the region so that we can understand how we address the key challenges, how we promote collaboration, how we innovate, how we promote sustainability in the industry. And today I have just such an esteemed panel with me, and it's my honor here today to introduce my panelists. So I'll start with Mr. Kuljit Gata Aura, President of Boeing Global Middle East, Turkey, Africa, and Central Asia. He is responsible for coordinating all company-wide activities in the region and developing and implementing the country and regional strategies. Kuljit focuses on government affairs, new business and industrial partnership opportunities, corporate citizenship projects, and expanding Boeing's presence and strengthening companies' relationships with customers and other stakeholders. I have Mr. Ziad Al-Hashmi, CEO of Lufthansa Technik Middle East. Mr. Ziad was appointed CEO in October 2011, and with a career spanning key roles in the aviation industry, including positions at Sharjah International Airport and MTU, Ziad, who joined LHT in 1999, has created a global world-class MRO here in the Middle East under his guidance and supervision. In addition, Ziad serves on the board of the Middle East Business Aviation Association and on the advisory board of directors for Emirates Aviation University. I have Mr. Ahmed Al-Shahi, is the senior manager for the aerospace section at the UAE GCAA. Mr. Shahi has been with the GCAA for over 17 years and brings with him a wealth of experience in air traffic control and airspace management. He is responsible for the UAE airspace regulatory framework, as well as drone operation approvals within the UAE. And last but not the least, I have Miguel A. Lopez. Miguel is a managing director for Accenture Strategy for Aviation and Aerospace, and he's based in the Middle East. For the last 18 years, Miguel has been active in management consulting and other senior industry roles, advising public and private entities across Europe and Middle East. Before consulting, Miguel had multiple senior roles in aviation and aerospace industries for Tier 1 aerospace European Airlines Group, IAG, and Iberia. So, with that introduction, let's start with, let's say, our first question to the panel. Aerospace and aviation has been such a significant factor in the UAE's economy. If you see some of the growth forecasts, we currently, as of 2024, we expected to have 140 million passengers in the UAE, which is going to grow by over 50% in the next 10 years. 500 plus airplanes are going to grow more than double over the next 10 years. In 2023 alone, the aviation and aerospace sector contributed $50 billion to the UAE's GDP and supported more than 800,000 jobs. My question to you, gentlemen, is, as we look at the future and as we look at the growth forecasts, what are some of the key transformational changes that you see in the industry going forward for us to be able to support this kind of growth? I'll start with you, Kuljit.
Yeah, thanks, Tej. And look, I'll just add to those statistics because actually that's around 13% of the UAE's GDP is produced through aviation, 1 in 10 jobs. So when you look at it in those terms, it's very, very significant for the UAE's growth, and it always has been. If you look at the trends, I mean, in our market outlook, we're predicting that there'll be a requirement for 3,000 new aircraft into the Middle East over the next 20 years. There'll be a requirement for around 225,000 related jobs. I think what you're seeing at the moment is just a lot of competition in this area through a lot of countries. So UAE obviously has been in the forefront, but you've got other countries like Saudi Arabia, you've got countries like Turkey who are really vying for that same concept in terms of, you know, moving huge populations from east to west and then back again. And of course, you look at India, you've got a resurgent airline under private ownership now in India, and clearly from the orders that you can see there, huge growth plans. So I think, as with most things, I think the UAE is always thinking ahead, and it was very good to see the announcement of the DWC project that in the next 10 years will yield an airport that will potentially have up to 260 million passengers. And to put that into perspective, the largest airport at the moment is Atlanta, and that's 130. So the plans are huge. I think what the UAE has done so brilliantly well is really reinvent the hub concept. And I think you're going to see that going to even the next level, because of course it's not just about having a big airport where you can bring people in and take them out. It's about all the infrastructure that surrounds that. It's about your ability to get in and out of that airport through immigration in a seamless way. I think those of us who use the airports here, we land from an international destination, and depending on where we live, we can be in our own homes in 45 minutes. That's what the differentiator is, and you're going to see the boundaries getting pushed even more here in the UAE in terms of cutting-edge technologies that digitize this entire experience. The other area that's obviously going to be complementary to that is around how people actually get to the airport. So again, the UAE has taken huge strides in the area of advanced air mobility. We have our colleague here from the GCAA. We've been, and ourselves and others have always been talking to them a lot about what the regulatory environment is around that would support those operations. You're looking at the building of infrastructure, vertiports to really enable that. And that's obviously not just going to be for passenger, it's going to be very important in really supporting the whole logistics hub concept, because of course you've got Jebel Ali, you've got DWC itself, you've got Abu Dhabi here, where I attended a presentation yesterday where there were 3 different companies, whether it's Kezad, whether it's Abu Dhabi ports. So there's this huge build-up of logistics infrastructure, and the airports are going to play a huge part in that. Air cargo is going to play a great part in that, and so is, of course, advanced air mobility. And finally, I think everything's got to be sustainable. So if we're going to be able to support this level of growth, it's got to be done in a way that protects the environment. At Boeing, we've always been huge advocates of sustainable aviation fuel as being really the only drop-in solution to helping the industry get to net zero by 2050. Again, airport infrastructure is going to need to support that, and it's going to be a real push through OEMs, through the operators, and through the airport providers and the related infrastructure. And I think, we'll get an opportunity later to say where we play in all of that.
Yeah.
But for me, it's just going to be a growth in all of these areas, building on what's already here, building on the phenomenal ecosystem that's been created. Of course, I've got my colleague here who's, Lufthansa Technik, that I've been to their operation in DWC. I think it's even got bigger since the last time I went. So we're just going to see growing, and of course companies like Sanad, companies like Strata, companies that we work with, you can just see them going from strength to strength.
Yeah, no, fantastic. I think, and I think you make some key points around, infrastructure and logistics and all the key enablers to support this kind of growth of the industry. Maybe Ziad, from your perspective, what is your view on sort of the major transformations that you see happening in the UAE?
Yeah, it's like Kuljit, you said it. It's the numbers are huge, and if you look worldwide, the growth is around 1.82%, and in our region here, we're talking about over 3%. So it's growing twice as fast as anywhere else. And when you look at that contribution to the GDP, 10 in Dubai, maybe it's even a little bit more. You can see it's really in so many different sectors: logistics, maintenance, airport operations, the last mile, transportation. It really promotes and supports so many other areas within the economy. On the one hand, it's growing extremely fast, and you can see that. And to cope with this I think, tremendous growth. Yeah? On the one side, you've got the airlines. They need support from suppliers, from providers. But I think one of the big challenges that we see is really the human capital. And I think you see a lot here, and the GCAA is supporting and training activities, which we also take part in. You have all the universities, which are now aviation and logistics and airport operations. I think that's really important developments. But I think it's still, with all of those, it's still the demand is more than what the supply can get. So I think definitely the human capital side, that's really important. And there'll be definitely more and more investments into this, training centers and other areas. The other side, I think, is also what you mentioned, the sustainability side. I think that's becoming more and more important. And how can we, as, let's say, from our industry, support in that? There's a couple of projects. I mean, it's great to see also in the UAE, we did supported in a joint venture together with Masdar and Siemens, hydrogen fuel development, where they want to see how to develop those fuels. So that's one area which is definitely being invested in more and more. And then, of course, that infrastructure that comes behind it is again. So, okay, one is there's a solution, but then how do you bring that solution onto the providers at the airports? The question at the end is, how do these different stakeholders come together? How do we work together to, one, support and be part of that growth? Yeah? And I think we see it more now, especially here in the region, private government initiatives or collaborations, whether it's with universities, or we did something with Sanad as well on the technology side, some projects. And I think this we'll see more and more. But I think definitely the challenge is trying to keep up with that growth. That will be
industry collaboration, sustainability, talent development.
Absolutely.
I think are keys. I think, and if I switch focus to Ahmed, yourself, with all this growth, with all this traffic, all these flights coming in, definitely that puts a lot of pressure on the air traffic management infrastructure, air traffic controllers, the technology behind it. What do you foresee, the changes coming in to manage this kind of growth?
Thank you very much. As my colleagues mentioned, so I'll add to that. One of the main aspects, so the UAE airspace itself can handle up to 4,500 movements per day. At this stage, we're around between 2,800, 4,000, 3,000, depending on the time of year. The challenge was, and always will be until these things get fixed up, is the infrastructure on the ground. Because you can move as many airplanes as you want in the sky, but if the airport throughput is not fast enough to what you can cope in the sky, then you've got a challenge there. Then you end up with congested airspaces, you have got longer holding times, you've got more fuel burn. So we do foresee that, especially in the next couple of years until Maktoum DWC gets fully established and run, with the increase of traffic, not just within the UAE. From the airspace perspective, it's never just the UAE, it's the UAE and the region alongside. When you hear about Air India's expansion and purchasing X airline. The UAE, for instance, when the airspace establishment was, there wasn't any Air Arabia Abu Dhabi, there wasn't the Wizz Air Abu Dhabi. So that wasn't, those new entrants weren't there to start with. Then you had as well the establishment in Saudi Arabia, Riyadh Air. So all these new additions are adding on to what you've foreseen. So sometimes you'd need more of a collaboration to understand what is not just your local needs, but even your regional needs. How much are they expecting to expand? Because based on that expansion, you need to know, can you cope? Do you need to do additional air traffic flow management? Do you need to allocate slow times to enter the airspaces? So all these things you have to work around. So from the GCA's perspective, the biggest challenge is to keep up with these new entrants, not the additional, but more of new entrants. So in this case, you've got the new air taxis coming in. So do you need to do new terminologies? You need to put new regulations, especially when it comes to certification perspectives, the OEMs. So you have all this huge possibility for expansion in the trade based on these new entrants. Another one that is, because from the regulator, we see all these new things coming up. You've got new technologies that want to be established here, providing Wi-Fi services with solar aircrafts up at 60,000 feet. They need specific areas to climb through. But again, the UAE's airspace construct, 51% of it is restricted for military active, for military training and all. Then you're left with 49% squeezed up on the north side of the UAE over the water. So it creates a challenge. You've got 8 international airports next to each other, within each one next to the other less than 100 miles. So you've got that challenge. You've got more than 130 heliports. You've got military bases. You've got, and now you've got as well the drone activities increasing day by day for daily uses, for surveys, for mapping, for media coverage, drone shows. You've got a lot of these new changes coming in. With that then comes different systems to monitor. You've got introduction of UTMs. So all these new systems come in with new maintenance possibilities, companies for maintenance, companies for research and development, enhancements. And as well with those new entrants, the air taxis would have then new OEMs, new logistics, power supply. Even the drone maintenance themselves, when you'll end up with so many drones, then you end up, who's going to maintain those drones? We've got local manufacturing drones now in the UAE that are manufacturing drones. So who's going to maintain that? Are they going to outsource the maintenance? So you've got a lot of possibilities for that. So one last thing was the saying is developing regulatory frameworks and keeping up with it in order to allow for these entrants to be there. And as well, what was mentioned is the human capital for these things is retaining the people that you already have and getting new, plus it would be the training requirements for all these new entrants, that you have your current staff to train upon, and then the new joiners to be actually either qualified, which is very difficult to find, so you'll have to invest in developing your own internal training program for new joiners on these new things.
So new technology, keeping up with regulatory framework, and talent. Talent is becoming a key theme out of this discussion. Miguel, over to you. I mean, you work across the region. You've worked in other parts of the world as well. What are some of the things that you see elsewhere that we can think about as best practice that we can think about in the UAE that can be very transformational to the industry?
Okay. Thank you, Tej. I mean, so there are these major disruptions or disruptive forces that we have seen. So the colleagues in the panel has commented about talent, has commented about the supply chain volatility in terms of material availability and accessibility. It has been also, I mean, all, let's say, the boom that is happening these days in the new technologies or emerging technologies like AI, generative AI. For example, this is one of the areas that definitely we see a lot of push, a lot of growth across the globe. In use cases, there is a lot of POCs, but we have seen that there are areas in which these technologies are really impacting. There are reports that actually sizing the impact of AI and generative AI for up to $40 billion over the next 4 to 5 years, meaning that there are impacting across the full value chain. For example, in BD, so it's something very, let's say, a quick win, which these new technologies are helping players, organizations to respond faster, go to market faster to these, let's say, big RFPs that are coming into the market. I would say deriving concrete and specific requirements and go again faster to market. Also in supply chain, so there is a lot of information. There are players that are having around 8,000 suppliers across their network. So all of this information needs to be digested and needs to be looked at, I will say, in a way that proactively you see what are the different bottlenecks. So these things are really picking up these days in the market. So again, so AI and generative AI are really reinventing the industry and the way of working on the work as we know it. So, and it's something that definitely we see a revolution in the world these days.
Yeah, no, very interesting, and I think we keep hearing about ChatGPT and all of those sorts of things, but that's just scratching the surface. I think, as you delve deeper and find real applications for industry, I think it's going to be a game changer in the future.
Correct.
Great. So I think let's double click on some of the things that you've said, gentlemen. We have 4 panelists who represent 4 different parts of the industry, right? We have the OEM, so Boeing. We have an MRO service provider, Lufthansa Technik. We have the regulator, GCAA, and then we have management consultancy and digital experts here. So I think we'll get a very well-rounded perspective on what we're trying to do here, and maybe understand each of your roles, your organization's role in driving this change, in making this transformation happen. And I'll start with you, Kuljit. So what is Boeing doing, going forward? What is the role that you see yourself playing as part of this transformation?
Aerospace is a very, very long cycle business. So And the barriers to entry are very high. There are large regulatory barriers to entry. I really look back at the journey that we started with the UAE going back over a decade, when there was a national aspiration to create an indigenous aerospace capability here. And if you then wind on, 10 years, you can see that came to fruition. I can tell you that there were a lot of people that were very skeptical at Boeing about the ability for Mubadala Aerospace, as was then, to establish an MRO, because, the qualification requirements, the infrastructure requirements. But you wind forward 10 years and, you just have to go to Strata, and I take every senior executive at Boeing to Strata so they can see it. And Strata produces the 787 vertical fin. It's a phenomenal work statement, and they do a phenomenal job. We had a number of our team supporting that work statement for a number of years, but as time's gone on, that it's now purely down to Strata, and they're doing work with other OEMs, and that's terrific, because the more work you can put in these facilities, just the better they become.
Yeah.
And I'm really proud of the fact that if you go there, it's a very, the percentage-wise, it's 80% Emirati workforce, and of that 80, another 80 are women.
Yes.
It's a really phenomenal place, and we're very proud of what we do there. And then Strata and Solvay had a joint venture. They are going to be producing aerospace-grade composite, which will obviously go on to our products. And then you look at Edge Precision Industries.
Yes.
This is a one-of-a-kind, world-class asset here in the UAE for metallic work on aerospace-grade parts. And again, not just for Boeing, for other parts of the industry. And it's again, a one-of-a-kind. They're a Boeing supplier. And again, we're very proud of that legacy. So I think that from up, you start these things, but of course then the next stage is to work with them and try and help them to be successful. So I can see that continuing. I think the other area that I think we need to highlight is around sustainability. I mentioned it before, but the UAE's really been in the forefront in terms of identifying the issues, taking steps to really see what the UAE can do, and obviously culminated in a very successful hosting of COP28. But even back in 2010, before there was, it was firmly on the agenda, ourselves and Etihad and Khalifa University worked on a very significant sustainability project around the Sustainable Bioenergy Research Consortium, which was basically looking at how you could create sustainable aviation fuel from biomass. And again, a great project. Since then, we've worked with the Ministry of Energy on SAF roadmap. We've entered into a consortium with a number of partners, including the airline customers, including the fuel producers, to really bring the whole value stream together to look at what the next step is to enable an indigenous SAF industry. Because clearly when you look at the numbers here in the UAE in terms of the importance of aerospace, I think even the roadmap said that it would be a great opportunity to create that kind of an industry. And then I think the final area that I'll highlight that we've been involved in, obviously the relationships with the universities are key, but I think that around the whole talent pipeline, it's got to start at a very early age. We have worked with young people here in the UAE and across the region on STEM-related activities. We have a STEM centre here in the UAE where young people can come, they can get interested in STEM, and again, it can start to, at a very early age, inspire people, bring them through into looking at careers in aviation and space, because obviously the two are linked. The UAE's got huge aspirations in space, and it has done amazing steps to establish itself in that the panoply of nations that are involved in space. I mean, look at the Mars probe, look at the lunar rover. So again, I'm very proud of the work that we do there with our NGOs to enthuse young people, to create internships, to bring people through the organization.
Yeah. No, that's great. And maybe I'll just ask a follow-up question and to all the panelists, Kuljit. So you talked about sustainability and the work you're doing with the different universities, et cetera, et cetera. If I draw parallels to the airline world, we have the CORSIA standards, and we have lots of things going on where we're creating global expectations and standards for industry players to meet and adhere to. In the aerospace world, do you think that we need something like that? Is there something that we can drive forward from the UAE here?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think the UAE is one of the nations that was actually the first nation in this region to commit to net zero by 2050.
Yeah.
The actual IATA target is for the industry to be net zero by 2050. And as I said, we believe that what's going to help the industry get there is adoption of SAF.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, at the moment, SAF is only certified, you can only have a blend of up to 50% with Jet A, just from a regulatory perspective. Obviously, Boeing and Airbus and others sit on the body that certifies fuel. We do a lot of tests, and we have done with both Etihad, with Emirates on the Boeing airframes and the GE engines around ensuring that when you can get to 100% SAF, that it's going to be completely safe and it's going to have the same performance as any other type of fuel. And so clearly, that's the journey that we're all on. The UAE has made a number of great strategies, particularly in relation to hydrogen, because I think if you really look at SAF in the out years, it is going to be this whole power to liquid play, and it's great to see at a federal level that level of long-term thinking that involves all the different stakeholders, all the members of the value stream to enable that. Because one thing we realized, where you can find an environment where there is, fuel producer, there is an off-taker, that missing piece is really around the policy that supports all of that and then incentivizes people to produce. And clearly, where you have a huge benefit in a country like the UAE is that you can have a policy that is going to be a long-term policy.
Yeah.
It's not going to be, it's not going to be disrupted necessarily. And so that is very different to a number of different countries where you can have that very, very long-term view.
Yeah. And maybe, Ziad, maybe your thoughts on sustainability and what we can do about it.
On the sustainability, I mean, it's completely agree with Kuljit, what you're saying. You have to get the different stakeholders together. It's not one person that can do it, and there's a great opportunity here. Yeah, so the drive is here, but also the resources are here to drive these kind of projects, and I find that quite exciting. The other part was the technology side, right? The digitalization, and I think you mentioned the AI and the language models. I think that's definitely developing extremely fast in other areas, and I think also quite rightly in our area it's taking a little bit longer because of all the regulations that are around it from the authorities, from a quality point of view, from a safety point of view. So definitely we will, from an aviation personally, I think, take a much more rigorous approach to these kind of technology that's coming. But definitely I think that's one aspect which will really be a game changer in what we're doing. Yeah? At the moment we're looking at predictive maintenance, those kind of things, and to do that you need to collect data. And I think there's enough data, even Boeing is producing so much data on their aircrafts. The question is, of course, how can we translate this for us as an MRO, that data into better repairs, better maintenance routines, better flight plannings, and so on. So, I mean, one example which we developed just recently, and it was a kind of a predictive flight planning tool to see where those pockets of currents, air currents are. I mean, that's just a simple example, but this can go into so many different areas, operations and so on. And I think is capturing that data and then using those models which are already developing very well in other areas and then using those to do that. And I think to do that, of course, you need the right people, right? You need young people who are very talented, which you mentioned, the talent. And I think that's one thing which I see it's an opportunity, especially here. We have a lot of young people who are eager to learn and are quite savvy with these kind of technologies, and the educational institutes are there. I think from our side, or my side, it's I think it's important that we bring that aviation awareness to those younger generations.
Yeah.
At the moment, you can see that there's a trend to go into, tech, into, the Googles, into those sectors. And aviation is maybe not the way it was portrayed previously due to the different crises. So I think that's one thing which we definitely need to do is bring that interaction, make younger people aware what the opportunities are. And from our side, I mean, we're trying to do internships, we're trying to work with universities, trying to bring young kids in to make them feel where would the opportunities lie. Yeah?
And from a regulatory perspective, if we want to promote sustainability, if we want to make sure that we're achieving certain KPIs and certain standards, to achieve the net zero by 2050, what is your perspective?
From a regulator's perspective is mainly to ensure that your regulatory framework enables sustainability to take place. For instance, in the airspace design, because sustainability goes hand in hand with efficiency. So from an airspace perspective and the operational aspects, you've got to be as efficient as possible in order to promote sustainability. So in this case, in our airspace designs as part of the UAE air traffic management strategy, is any designs taking place do take environmental considerations, and it's part of any airspace change that they have to submit an environmental impact depending on the change. Recently, they've introduced free route airspace. In the UAE, the airspace itself is not as major that the impact of the free route airspace in comparison to larger airspace would be, but it's the idea behind it on a long run. One of my instructors, when I was air traffic controller previously, told me, when you give an aircraft direct routing, even if it's 1 mile, don't think of the 1 mile. He's flying that 1 mile for 365 days. So you're saving him 365 miles a year. So it accumulates in that perspective. So it's a mindset as well. You've got to push it through these things. We do as well through our national committees. We have these considerations. One of them is part of enablement. So today you will have new entrants, air taxis. Okay, they're going to run. Okay, I call them electric helicopters. Don't ask me why, but because it makes my life easier. So from an operational perspective, they have a transponder on board. It's an aircraft. If it's powered by electricity or skittles, it's the same thing. So from that aspect, it's charged by a lithium battery. Okay, so from a firefighting perspective, in an aerodrome, it's going to operate or offsite. What do you use? So in this case, you'd have to enable that and to tell the industry what they'll use. What we did was we got all the stakeholders together, and again, it's the end user who knows what is needed for that. And then the subject matter experts are putting out fires can evaluate that. So enabling that through any sort of mechanism you have from a regulatory framework in that perspective. Another aspect of airspace design is always considering the continuous climb, continuous descent operations. However, it's not always possible. For me, as air traffic controller, the sooner the aircraft is down, the better, so it's expedite descent. However, you try to cater as much as possible in the design, but from an operational perspective, that takes place. This where comes back as well to when the concept has to be expanded more and probably injected into regulations to be enforced, is a more widespread airport collaborative decision-making, ACDM. In that case, that's where you got everything linking in together, which will increase the efficiency of the operations, therefore enabling the sustainability in the long run.
And Miguel, over to you. You talked about generative AI and new technologies and how that is transforming some of the processes in the industry. If we try to make a link now to sustainability and how technology is helping us shape the sustainability agenda and help us achieve the goals that we set for ourselves, what are some of the things that you're seeing that are sort of leading indicators of where the industry is going with this?
As mentioned before, AI and Gen AI is helping to shape across the full value chain, starting from design. So we have seen cases in which the co-pilot is helping engineers to redesign, to upgrade some of these designs and, areas of, improve the operation for making an impact in terms of sustainability. Right now, for example, a couple of days ago, it was announced a deal together with Microsoft and General Electric Aerospace and Accenture in order to enable Gen AI to provide solutions and access to airliners and clients to access to maintenance records in days, meaning that the productivity, meaning that it's a lot of information coming to the manufacturers, OEMs, in order to improve not just only the design, but also how efficient these machines are flying. So meaning that you can install improvement in order to make them more efficient. So this is one of the, let's say, angles that we have seen. Now, if you look at other spectrums, for example, like operations and supply chain, so it is always crucial to have the inventories ready, availability, material availability, in order to provide, and let's say, to have these machines up in the air. So meaning that, so sustainability is also an angle across these supply chains. So in order to improve efficiencies, productivity, and so on and so forth. This is impacting across the full value chain.
Thanks. And you talked about predictive maintenance, and I'll switch to our MRO expert here. Is it real? Is it happening? It's been talked about for a while.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there are products out there, right?
Yeah, there
I mean,
are a lot
we've
of
got-
products. Yeah, there's engine conditioning monitoring products. We have a platform called Aviatar where we bring not only our solutions on, but also others. But it's developing.
And what is do you see the value addition of that in terms of, real dollar impact?
I mean, just on a simple basis, there are some products. We have one as well, and I'm sure there's competitors out there that have them, where we optimize the stock levels of materials at different locations for an airline. And that's a lot of information that you have to process, put together, and then decide what goes where and how. Flight planning, you have the same thing. So it's really coming in all facets. I mean, what we're looking at in the last 1-2 years, what's coming out, I think it's tremendous.
And I think actually, if you think about it, I mean, we talked about how, if you really look at how you make aviation more sustainable, I mean, clearly the newer aircraft will improve efficiencies by 20 to 25%. But you've got to remember that a lot of the older aircraft will be up in the sky for a long, long time. So how do you improve the efficiencies? Digital products, because they can pretty much squeeze another 10% of efficiency through, whether it's a GPS tracker that navigates you through turbulence, whether it's, these products that help the continuous descent landings, again, another area where, there's more chance of pollution. So, yeah, I mean, each OEM, and I know Lufthansa have got, huge banks of digital products that they offer to customers. And I think that's that's just going to continue.
Great. And going back to sort of ATM and airspace management and so on, I mean, there's talk about new technologies that are helping us reduce, vertical separation minimums and making the skies more efficient and so on. What is the technology transformation happening in the ATM world as far as UAE is concerned?
So the transformational part, from an ATC perspective, again, I look at it from that perspective. There is a boundary to it because you're allowed to do X, but can it expand more? Yes. There are a lot of add-ons that would, expedite the decision-making for air traffic controllers on position. But again, it just depends on how big a volume of airspace you have. I worked at traffic control in UAE for 15 years, so I've seen the airspace change from 23 routes up to 57 now. We've squeezed every single route to be 7 miles apart, so you're at your minimus right now. So we've reached a point where it's you cannot even make an additional route. The minute if you add a route between the two routes, you've lost separation between all aircrafts flying on all 3 routes. So you add the minimus. So you end up with 3 miles. Our minimum right now is 3 nautical miles below 19,000 feet and 5 miles above. So if you go to that extreme, then you're just at the boundary at your minimum. So we've already reached that expansion. The newer technologies is about the predictive electronic flight plans, giving different forecasts, interlinking weather with the information. So it's all about data sharing in that perspective, future integration between UTMs and ATMs. So those add-ons are there. The thing is with the airspace, it's the size of it and how it's compressed together. No matter how much technology you have, you need that element of human as the traffic controller, because the minute one thing goes wrong, just a go around at the aerodrome, that's it. You got to hold now and it just keeps on piling back. Same thing with the weather. On a normal day, when we have fog, for instance, aircrafts are holding up to 37,000 feet. We've got a procedure where we stop aircrafts all the way up to Cairo. That's how it is. We stop the traffic because there's no way for aircrafts to go. Because all the airports are next to each other, it's not like Ras Al Khaimah, sky clear, and Abu Dhabi is fog. And the same thing with the weather, when you've got thunderstorms and that. It's spread out the whole country, so that's it. Everywhere is stuck. Aircrafts are moving everywhere. You cannot have I would say, an AI air traffic management. It cannot exist because those routes that are structured disappear.
Yeah.
This instance. So it's like every man for himself sort of situation. Those advancements in ATS, when I say there's a boundary, it means it's a boundary from what you can actually do from a realistic perspective. Because you got a pilot, he's got his reaction time, then the lag in the frequency, and then the ATC. But are there new technologies? It never ends. Before you used to draw lines between aircrafts, only 3 lines. Now you can do up to 10 or 15 lines. You can make a map when you're drawing. So it can develop as much as you want. We have today the arrival manager, which increases the efficiency of the airport's operations, because previously we never had the arrival manager. So you'd have aircraft arriving from east to west, and then they would close this gate. They were expecting the aircraft coming in from Thailand to Park X. Next thing you know, they got the aircraft arriving from Muscat, parked here. And so, but the passengers here are expected to be there because now you got the passengers running to the airport to get a transit. So there are technologies that can obviously assist, but again, like I said, it is what it is. It's where you are right now.
And I think that's very good. And actually, that leads me to my next question. So we've talked about technology, we've talked about sustainability, we've talked about regulation. And what I think, Kuljit, you touched upon earlier is talent, right? And talent development. And everybody's talking about, ultimately, you need that human skill, that decision-making capability. You need to be able to develop that local talent to grow the industry sustainably going forward. I think, and this is one that requires collaboration across the industry, that requires working with universities, et cetera, Maybe, and I think probably also one of the key challenges that industry players here in the region face is lack of or shortage of qualified talent. What can we do as an industry, body, in the UAE to make sure that we're sustainably growing the talent pool in the country?
Yeah, look, I mean, we all talked about it a little bit. I mean, it's the key resource, and I mentioned the stat earlier on. I mean, the requirement for jobs is going to be huge, and it's already 1 in 10 aviation related here. Yeah. I think the good news is that you always look to have good academic institutions that are equipping the young people to come out with the kind of qualifications that will, which will qualify them to come into the industry. Ziad talked about the digitization. Look, it's already happening. I mean, the aircraft are going to be designed on computers. Model-based engineering. Our T7, for example, which is our advanced trainer, it was entirely a digital native, which meant that it could get from computer screen to production in 3 years. I mean, this is how everything's going. So as the whole industry digitizes, the access to different demographics is also going to be there. And I think the other aspect of it is, of course, is that where we can play a role as a multinational OEM is by really bringing people in from the UAE into our own operations, and then also getting that side of the equation. And we've been doing that for almost a decade now with Mubadala. Strata engineers have cycled through Salt Lake City, through Everett, and it's just been hugely beneficial because they bring all that on-the-job learning and back into Strata. So I think those sorts of programs are really important. Internship programs are really important. Give people a flavour of what it's really like to work. During COVID, of course, all these things just went into abeyance. So one of the first things that I did when I came back was I reinstated that internship program, and we brought back some of the interns that had successfully come through, and we got them all together, and it was really powerful. And so that's important. The other area that I do want to focus on is women in this industry. Yeah. We are huge proponents of women in aviation, and we've just launched an Instagram account called Pick Up Your Wings and Fly, and this is purely aimed at encouraging young women to come into aerospace. And really, it's not even a Boeing-branded platform. We created it, but ultimately, it's like great stories that are being inspirational stories from women in aviation that will get picked up through the social media channels and hopefully inspire that next generation.
Yeah, digital first ways of...
It has to be now, has to be, yeah.
Ziad, your perspective?
Yeah, just to, I think we're aware of the time. It's like you said, Kulja, it's the talent. I think everything that's being done here is amazing because it's all pushing in the right direction. I mean, an example is our Sanad Corporation, where we at Khalifa University, we developed something together.
Yep.
I mean, those are the kind of things. You can see there's really a global lack of people. I mean, in the past, it used to be we used to try and bring people from other areas of the world. And actually, for the last, I would say, 1-2 years, I've actually seen people being poached from our organization into Europe. And visa regulations are opening up there. And there's really a lack. In some areas, they're having auto mechanics being trained as aircraft mechanics because there's just a lack of people.
Yeah.
So one is how do we retain those people here? And then exactly what we were talking about, and how do we collaborate more? And I see the regulators here especially are really enablers of business, right? So when we sit down with the GCA and we have an idea, we can talk and we can understand how can we make this happen. And I think more of that, whether it's, tax, or other incentives, how do we get that industry here? And then there's a lot of players, and I think now is the question, how do we get ourselves more together to find other solutions?
Due to the lack in that case, so organizations generally would have to just, even from our side, to do a gap analysis. But the main thing, you have to invest in the staff that you have, and then don't be stingy for new joiners when you need to send them out to training. You have to do the training, or you have to do a contingency. Another thing is, if you've got that expert at your workplace, don't waste him. Bring 3-4 people, let them work with him. Give him his job security, tell him, we're not going to get rid of you. Just train those people, because if you decide to leave or whatsoever, retire, we don't want to have that single point of failure. That's the main idea.
Very good. And Miguel, finally, from you.
Yeah. So I think as you touched upon all the different points, but starting from sector promotion, it is crucial that to start early on in the schools and the universities to create, the new generation of professionals, to start stimulating the public or the general public to access to the industry, point number one. Second, infrastructure, training infrastructure in country. So this is crucial, so identify what are the different critical roles that you are looking to train over the next years. Can be pilots, engineers, technicians, and cabin crew, for example, like other countries have done over the past 10 years. Funding as well is another crucial element. Starting to developing innovative solutions, invest on innovation, on creating local capabilities as well is crucial, and of course governance. So it is, at the end of the day, the alignment across the human capital agenda, it is crucial for at let's say, national level as well as the Emirate level. So these 4 points is what we have seen how others have done over the past 10 years, successfully, let's say, triple even the amount of direct jobs that they created. So it is actually UAE did exceptionally well over the past 10 to 15 years. For future, definitely there is a war of talent. So these days, technology is augmenting how the different professionals are working, changing, skilling, but this is something that definitely will help.
Considering we're out of time, I want to thank you all the panelists for your time today and the wonderful insights that we got. Big round of applause, ladies and gentlemen.